Hello and welcome, dear friends. In this video we are going to have a look at properties, also called getters and setters. At the end of the video we will answer the question which of these classes can be considered encapsulated. Let me open Unity. Okay, we have a very simple scene. The knight object is just an image with the hero script attached to it, and the lava object with the lava script on it. I believe we could come up with an interesting story about how the knight ended up in the lava, but it doesn't matter for this video. If I hit play, every frame the lava deals damage to the knight. The knight's health is decreasing and finally becomes negative. Negative health is not what we want to see in games. We usually do not let a hero's health fall below 0. I have added the particle system here just to make the scene a bit less boring. Okay, let's fix it up to get rid of the negative values. Let's see how the lava object deals damage. Open the lava script. Once per frame referring to the target object, the lava class calls the takes damage method. The only argument is the damage variable, which is equal to 1. The code is simplified as much as possible. Open the hero scripts. The health text object refers to the child TextMeshPro object, just displaying the current health of the knight. And we have the private field of integer type. The health of the knight is equal to 400. The takes damage method decreases the knight's health by an amount equal to damage and displays the current health of the knight. Okay, we can add the if statement to limit the value of the health variable like this, and it will work. Or we can use property to get the same result. Let me enable the property. It is a good practice to name the property the same as the variable name with a capital letter. Property is actually a combination of methods and a variable. The declared property has a get block and set block. The get method, also called an accessor, is used to return the value of the private variable, which is in our case the health variable. And the set accessor is used to assign a new value to the variable. The value keyword is used to define the value being assigned by the set accessor. It is a new value assigned to the private health variable whenever we change the value of the property. This syntax is the classic way to initialize a property. Let's see how it works. Let me disable the code block of the takes damage methods for a while and enable the starts methods. Now, if I change the value of the property, the value of the private variable will change as well. If I hit play, I will see it in the console window. And at this moment the syntax is no different than if we just made the health variable public. But since set and get are methods, we can extend them adding whatever comes to our mind. Let me add, for example, the if statement, saying that if a value I try to set to the property is negative, the value of the private variable will be 0. And let me modify the start methods a bit. I will try to set a new value to the variable, outside the limits. If I print the value of the health variable, I will see something like this. Restrictions were not violated. C# obeyed the condition written in the accessor. We have used the property as a natural extension of data field of a variable. There are other extensions that we can use. We can declare a property that only has a get block and not the set one. That kind of property is called a read-only property. If we create a read-only property, we can only read the value of a private field. If I try to set a value to the health variable, the compiler throws an error. And so we also can create a property that has a set block, not a get one. That kind of property is called write-only property. Write-only properties are rare and are most commonly used to restrict access to sensitive data. If I try to get a value stored by the variable, the compiler will throw an error. We can specify an access modifier for our property if we want to restrict its availability, but in C# we can even override the accessibility of get or set accessors. So what we can do is declare a public property that has the public getAccessor and private setAccessor. If our property is a public one, we don't have to add the public keyword to the getAccessor. It's going to be public anyway. If I try to access the property from another class, for example from the Lava class, and try to set a new value, then C# will say that the setAccessor is inaccessible. We can change the accessibility level of only one accessor. There is no point in having both accessors modified. If we want to modify both accessors, we should just modify the property access level. We can't use an access modifier on the get or set blocks that are more restrictive of the access modifier applied on a property itself. So if our property is private, there is no point in having the public get or set block. If no additional logic is required in a property accessor, we can use the auto-implemented properties for a more readable and concise way of declaring properties. The auto-implemented property consists only of get and set keywords, nothing more. In Unity, I believe it is just about saving time. If we don't need to add additional logic to the getter and setter, we can save time and declare property without declaring the private variable and write accessors in a simple form. Since I don't like using properties if there are no restrictions on the variable, I don't use the automatic properties. I hope my more experienced colleagues will not scold at me too much. We can use another syntax, starting with, I believe, C# 7.0. Both the get and set accessor can be implemented as expression-bodied members. In this case, we need to have both get and set methods. This example illustrates the use of expression-body definitions for both accessors. Note that in this case we don't use the return keyword inside the get accessor. We can use this syntax when we just need to assign a value to the variable or return its value. In this case we use lambda sign. We will get the same result. So the first use of properties is to extend the data fields. Secondly, when we talk about properties, we should mention encapsulation. Note that the health field itself remains private. And one of the signs of encapsulation is when you change the state of a field inside the class the field belongs to. This is good practice, but this condition is not enough to be honest about encapsulation. Let's go back to the examples I showed at the beginning of this video. The question was which of these variables can be considered encapsulated. The correct answer is that there is no encapsulation in any of the classes, since in all classes the access level of the variable is public and there are no restrictions on access to the variable. If we add limits, we can say that the variable is protected from at least misuse. In this case, we can start talking about encapsulation. So misuse protection is the second benefit of using properties. For example, your colleague writes his parts of the code and refers to the health variable. He didn't take into account that the variable has limitations and incorrectly wrote the code. Let's say that we only want to go between 0 and 100, because 100 might be our maximum health. And it would be kind of weird if our player could just be healed infinitely or be damaged so that his health was suddenly negative. Getters and setters will help to limit a variable. Especially properties help when you get data from databases. Okay, I hope now we can modify the scene. Let me remove all those lines. Good. Back to the takes damage method. This time there will be only 2 lines, because the property does the rest of the work. Open Unity, hit play. Cool. There are different opinions on how often properties should be used. My personal view is that almost no fields should ever be non-private. This leads to the fact that properties must be used very often. However, I will not focus on using properties in this tutorial. Properties make code a bit less readable, especially for beginners. So I'm gonna use properties when it's really necessary or when I just feel like it is important to remind you of properties. I hope this decision will speed up the learning process and I will be able to focus on how it all works, not data protection. I think it's all we need to know about properties so far. See you in the upcoming video.